Hey guys, welcome back. Today... Oh, okay, hang on. Before we start, let's address the elephant in the room. Me, quite literally, the elephant in the room. So, one of my goals on YouTube in 2017 was to put more personality into videos and be more than just a voice behind some Halo 2 gameplay. And this is my way of doing that, putting some real life stuff into videos. So let me know if you guys like this. I'm probably going to do more in the future, not in every video, but in quite a few videos. Also, I expect many memes to be made of my face. It's happened before. It's likely going to happen again. So anyways, let's get to the topic at hand. Noble Team. So today I want to sort of analyse Noble Team's characters, everybody apart from Noble 6, and give my opinion on whether or not I think they are good characters, because there's a lot of contention right now in the Halo community in that people are arguing as to whether or not Noble Team were good characters, or if Reach was even a good story. So I thought, you know, I'd just throw my highly subjective hat into the ring and give my highly subjective opinion. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so let's start with Noble 1, Carter. Carter always takes point in his actions and his behaviour. He's always first in and last out of a scenario. He's also objectively the vocal leader too. Bungie did a really great job writing him as a strong leader, and there's never really a point in the game where he doesn't feel like it. However, there's only a few situations where his character actually steps out of the leader role. Now, I guess this is a good thing, because it sort of reasserts his role as a strong leader. He's very strict and always formal, very military, but I'd argue that as the game goes on, this does get a little bit repetitive and his character never really evolves until his death. This makes him feel really one-dimensional. Now, the one dimension that we do get is great, but it's not nearly enough to make him a meaningful character. The times where he does disobey commands and stops being nothing but an agent of the UNSC are kinda refreshing and really do improve his character. For example, him talking back to Halsey after she lambasts Kat for interfering with her tech made him seem like more of a character and not just some leader following orders from up high. The scene where he agrees to Kat's plan to destroy the supercarrier is also one of these instances, and for me, it's the only scene in the entire game where Carter really feels human. They have literally no plan, and this highly controversial and highly unlikely to be successful plan that Kat has is their best option. It's literally all they have. He's pushed to go against orders from up high, but he's visibly out of options, and he knows that it's for the greater good, so eventually he caves and goes for it. His resilience to stick with orders and maintain formal just before Alexandria's glassing plays into his resilience and defiance as a character, proving that even in the most dire of situations, his priority one is to remain within his bounds and try not to interfere with anything that's above or even below him. Carter's death scene was courageous, and in my opinion, it was actually perfect for his character, and exactly how his character should have gone out. He went out to save his squad. He went out as a responsible leader. I think that overall he was written fairly well, very within his boundaries, but sometimes he does feel relatable. Sadly though, that's about it. He's kind of the typical military hard guy who, you know, just follows orders and stays as an agent of the forces up high. But when he does break out from this, his character becomes really cool. Overall though, I think Carter's alright. He's nothing great, nothing bad, but has potential if he becomes more human. Next up, Kat. Now, Kat is an interesting one. She has potential, and I mean real potential. A Spartan more refined to technological warfare than physical? That's fucking awesome! Completely breaks the stereotype of a Spartan, especially a Spartan 3. However, this potential is completely wasted. Really, as cool as her character sounds on paper, in practice there's really not much that she could be used for, at least in a game. Her main standout feature is her technological prowess and genius, which can only be shown off under very specific circumstances. Circumstances that require an entire cutscene to be constructed completely around it, which of course takes away from every other character and of course the overall narrative. It's sad that such a good idea is so wasted, but like I said, it's pretty much impossible for it not to be wasted, unless you center the entire goddamn game around her. She does have a pretty cool dynamic with Carter, considering that they are the two only survivors of the original Noble Team roster. It feels like she's the brains, and he's the one with the ability to put her crazy and out there plans actually into action. Their dialogue is really interesting, but due to her being impossible to utilize correctly, and Carter being way too one-dimensional, it never really goes anywhere. However, she does have one quite redeeming aspect for me, her persona. It doesn't exactly make her seem mentally or spiritually strong as her character suggests, but she has a sharp, dry persona, and it's the only thing to me that makes her feel like a human, and in that sense, it really works. She's not afraid to talk informally to Carter, which I really like. It seems to strengthen and add a new level of depth to their pretty one-dimensional relationship. Although it's only touched on a little bit in game, her habit of hacking into classified intel that's above her really supports this persona. She seems like a rogue, uncontrollable character of a Spartan that's so smart, she can kind of just do what she wants. This plays into her being almost the opposite of the true intention of the Spartans. She's the embodiment of the pen, or I guess in this case, the mind is mightier than the sword. In regards to her death, I personally think it was done really well. It happens completely out of the blue with absolutely no build-up or no forewarning. It comes excellently timed just after she said that really iconic line.
You didn't answer my question.
You want to know if we're losing?
I know we're losing. I want to know if we've lost.
However, with that said, I really don't think Kat is that much of a character. I mean, she has the potential to be, but she's just so underused in Reach because, like I said, for her potential to be truly realised, the game would have to practically centre around her. Okay, so June is a tricky one. I get the feeling his character is meant to almost be the personification of a perfect marksman, low profile, keeps to himself, and is quiet, and I think his character actually does this really well. The way that June speaks, combined with what I think is a really slick Iranian accent that I absolutely love, could not be more fit for his character. His voice is sharp, secretive, and in certain cases, makes him sound really elite. For example, when the militia ask if he's going to take back their guns on Nightfall, he responds with,
"No, I'm gonna steal it back."
And to me, that just sounds so sleek and badass. In that situation, he knows he has the upper hand, both figuratively and metaphorically, in the sense that he's a Spartan and they're just some illegal militia members. So why not make the most of it? I honestly can't think of another more descriptive term for this quote, so if you have any ideas, then leave them in the comments. One of June's idle comments is also pretty insightful. He says,
"I kill the enemy, but do not hate them."
Now, this makes June feel more rational and less, what's the word, official to me, even though it completely breaks the stereotypical mindset of a Spartan 3. I also got this impression when he notes that the Marines that died at Sword Base were cornered, whereas Carter implies that they were committed to the position. Now, this contrast for me is just more evidence towards June not exactly being your typical Spartan 3, and him having maybe a little more personal free will than others. However, he's sadly just another case of not having enough development. What's there is definitely awesome, and 343 have expanded more on his post-Reach life since, but in-game, he really doesn't do much, which is sad. He was the first dedicated sniper character in the Halo universe, and was set up well. I just don't think he did enough in-game to be a character worthy of anything other than alright, as much as that pains me to say, because he's probably my second favourite character on Noble. Emil, the objectively badass embodiment of the edgy, My Chemical Romance addicted teenager, with your skull-etched visor, savage knife addiction, and extremely high levels of testosterone. However, is there more to this character than meets the eye? I think so. Now, I've always loved Emil, purely due to his badassery, which is non-negotiable. But I did always acknowledge that, yeah, he's not a great character on a technical level. However, until I read this Reddit post, and I kid you not, it completely changed my mind. I'll link it in the description, but what it basically boils down to is that Emil is afraid of dying. He's actually extremely vulnerable. Now, the evidence for this is all very subtle, and yes, it is highly subjective. Some of this may be reading too much between the lines, but for me, it all just clicked and made perfect sense. Emil constantly makes negative comments directed at himself when the comments aren't necessary to the context. For example,
Command will not be keeping us company this trip.
I'm lonely already.
She needs a full psychiatric workup.
She's not the only one.
Lock it down, both of you.
May I?
Don't cut yourself.
Hey, you made it.
It's a regular family reunion.
Now these give me the impression that Emil's always focusing on a negative outcome of the situation he's in that could impact himself and thus lead to death. He also doesn't really seem to care about the death of others because they're just civilians and he's a Spartan, and as we all know, Spartans never die. However, he doesn't even seem that affected by George's death, at least not as affected as you'd expect him to be, considering it's likely that he's the first Spartan that Emil knew who actually genuinely died. This is also weird because he and George had quite the dynamic going on, yin and yang, George being the compassion and Emil being the sadism. However, it's Kat's death soon after that really seems to flick a switch in Emil and completely changes him. Now, like I've said before, the Reddit post and also my thoughts are heavily subjective and definitely are a victim of probably reading between the lines a little bit too much, but what I'm about to describe is something that I honestly cannot miss every single time I see this cutscene now. So, Kat's death was a huge surprise. However, more than that, it was the first time that Emil had actually seen a Spartan physically die right in front of him. And it wasn't like all the tales suggest. She didn't go down fighting. She didn't go down in a blaze of glory and gunfire. She was just unlucky. Just like anyone could be. She's a Spartan, yet she was killed just like any human ever could be. This put the vulnerability of the Spartans into full view for Emil, in my opinion, because after all, Spartans are still human. This has resonated perfectly in the following cutscene. The remainder of Noble are surrounding the blue light of the flare, signifying their rescue and signifying the resilience to keep on fighting, even with Kat's lifeless body in Carter's arms. Emil, on the other hand, is stood in a really vulnerable posture, right at the back, bathed in red light. I think this is subtle symbolism for his realization that Spartans can, and do die, just as easy as the rest of us. All in all though, edgy opinion for an edgy guy, I actually love Emil. Hands down, my favourite character on Noble. His death in close quarters combat was perfect and extremely bittersweet.
I'm ready! How about you?
And finally George, the only Spartan 2 of Noble Team, often regarded to as the big friendly giant. George is hands down the most human and most objectively characterized member of Noble Team. He's caring towards civilians, which really plays into the yin-yang with Emil that I mentioned earlier, because after all, these are citizens of his home planet, his one true love, Reach. All his actions and intentions are done with Reach in mind. His emotion when he sees Sword Base being bombarded from space and asks Dot to enhance the image, despite everything else that's going on where he is, shows his true connections to Reach, and honestly, is really sad. As a Spartan 2, he thinks that he just saw Halsey, who was essentially his goddamn mother figure, die, and he was completely unable to save her. This makes George's death even sadder. He dies thinking that his final actions were what saved his home and avenged the death of his mother, but how wrong he was. Hearing constant repeats of
slip space rupture detected.
Yeah, we're picking up anomalies too. Are you reading
Slip
it?
space rupture
Multiple
detected.
covenant signals.
Slip space
Does anyone
rupture
have a
detected.
They're everywhere.
Slip space rupture detected.
The whole damn
as the humongous Covenant fleet jumped to Reach less than a minute after George sacrificed himself, thinking that he'd sealed the deal was spine-chilling. That's the only word for it, and was such an emotional way for George to go out. All in all, Noble are a really mixed bag who seriously need an expanded universe book or graphic novel or, hell, maybe even an animated Blur short. Just something. All 5, 6 I guess if we include Noble 6, have such potential as characters, and if 343 can tap into their backstories and flesh them out more, all 5 could really become some of Halo's best characters in my opinion. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm going to keep this ending short because that was one long-ass video. I really hope you enjoyed my highly subjective opinions. Also, don't forget to leave your own opinions, as mainstream or as different as they may be, in the comments. And also check out that Reddit post about a meal. The link is right at the top of the description. And I'll catch you next time.